Welcome back to Closing Conversations, the show for founders, leaders, and sellers who win together. I'm your host, Max Notice. Today's guest is Dan Bauer, a 3-time founder, marketing strategist, mentor to entrepreneurs, and one of those people who's done enough in business to speak with real perspective instead of theory. Dan has built and exited a company, advised businesses across industries, worked across the highest level of brands like MasterCard and Citibank, mentored startup founders, launched an entrepreneur program for high school students with Inc. magazine, and now helps founders to think through everything from growth and positioning to exit strategy. In this conversation, we talk about why cold outreach has gotten so much harder, what fake familiarity really feels like and looks like in sales, why entrepreneurs need other entrepreneurs around them, and why the best founders really never stop building. Dan's thoughtful, sharp, and clearly is still having a blast doing the work. Let's get into it. Dan, so good to have you here. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, maybe the best way to generalize is I'm sort of at the portfolio stage of my career in life. I've got multiple interests and multiple priorities, and I'm having fun with each. And as one becomes less fun, it moves further down the list. So I'm constantly dealing with the A's and the B's and checking on the C's occasionally, but having fun and very satisfied with the pace and the content so far.
Why don't you also share, because you're involved in a lot of really cool stuff. When you told me this is what you're doing, what you have done, it kind of blew my mind. And we can dial back and go to, more general topics, but I would love if you could just share a little bit about what you're doing, what you've done, even just more specifically.
So in no particular order. So I'm doing marketing consulting, mainly for B2B companies, middle market usually, generally around branding issues and so on. I do that in partnership with a branding agency, and I'm sort of the front end of the parade doing market research, competitive analysis, stakeholder research, those sorts of things as inputs to the creative process. So I enjoy that very much. I'd love to be airdropped into a new industry. At this stage of my life, there are fewer new industries. There's usually some adjacency that I've had experience with, and I enjoy that as well. So that's the marketing consulting aspect. A second component is mentoring startup founders and startup leaders, usually early stage, some early stage. It's back of the cocktail napkin or just an idea. Others are, maybe they're funded, got the first round and trying to scale, and many in between. And so I really enjoy that. I view that in a way very similar to the marketing consultant. I bring that marketing perspective to a founder who generally is more operationally oriented or technologically oriented. So I balance them out. We focus on defining their ideal customer profile, analyzing how the competition has left opportunities or overlapped with them so we can reposition them, just sort of get their messaging and targeting and that sort of stuff teed up. So that's sort of the second thing. Third thing is a labor of love. In 2018, I started an entrepreneurship camp for high school students. I partner with Inc. magazine, the Bible of entrepreneurship. They're my media partner. And right now we attract somewhere between 500 and 1,000 high school students from around the world to come to the camp. We hold it at blue chip college campuses. Right now we're at Columbia, Duke, Michigan, and Cal Berkeley, and we'll be there this summer. It's a 9-day immersion in entrepreneurship, classroom, as well as simulations. And the fun part is the Shark Tank-like business pitch at the end. In addition to being entrepreneur in residence, I wrangle from my network founders, high profile, very successful and giving founders who want to share their story and inspire these teens and ask and answer tough questions, and then judge the pitch competition on the last day of the program. I draw from my network, which is Inc. 5,000 companies, the fastest growing private companies in America, of which I started and led one for 20 years. Also ABC Shark Tank, the founders we've seen popularized on TV, and I have quite a few of them who come, and Harvard alumni, of which I am also fortunate to be one, and another organization called Post-Exit Founders, which is a newer group that I've joined, which is, as the name implies, individuals that founded and exited one or more companies and have great stories. And again, this wonderful motivation, altruistic motivation to pay it forward and help others. And so that's the pool of founders I draw from. And I bring them to the campus and we spend an hour or two with the students. Another venture that I started recently, I told you it was a lot, is career coaching for professional athletes. One of my former clients is a wealth advisor to professional athletes, primarily minor league baseball players. And so these are folks that have generally received a bonus, a signing bonus, and then a few years down the road realize that the major leagues is probably not going to happen. And they've devoted so much of their waking hours to their sport that they now need some help and partnership in figuring out an achievable career goal that's not sports, or maybe sports related, but is not playing the game anymore. And so I work with them on a one-on-one basis. So those are the big categories that I'm involved with in now.
You're like the dream. Like, again, when we met, you and I really hit it off, but you seem to at least have done a lot and achieved a lot in your career and enjoy what you're doing. So you're able to kind of give back to the world. You're able to, exactly like you're saying with the portfolio, spend your time where you want to.
Yes. At this point, if I'm not doing that, I screwed up along the way because, I've paid my dues. I've done things I needed to do, maybe enjoyed less, but always knew that, when it's not satisfying and gratifying and meaningful, you pivot and move on to the next thing. That's good fortune or luck or what have you, but there's always been that pivot for me, which maybe it took a couple of months, but boy, once I got to that next, piece of the portfolio, I knew that was a good move. I never have to look back and second guess. I should have stayed. I should have done this. I should have done that. I don't have time or energy for that practice.
Yeah. Well, I think you kind of earned that in a way, the right to do that.
Well, I appreciate that. I don't know if that's true or not, but I've tried to surround myself with great mentors and great mentees. And that has, reading those tea leaves kind of keeps me headed in the right direction. There's always checkpoints and smart people that will, either smile at what you tell them or wince at what you tell them. And if you could empathize enough, I found that I get the message and I will sort of test my hypothesis with them. And I don't need everybody to say it's the next move is the right move, but their questions and their concerns and their encouragement are the fuel for me making the decisions I make. I'm not hasty. I like to, kind of get the lay of the land and then go all in.
I'm very much the same way. I'm fortunate to have really wonderful people in my corner. And sometimes when I'm at some sort of a pivot or a crossroad or a big decision, I know I can ask their opinion, not have it be the decree. And then I can use the information I've learned. And I'm so much more confident in moving forward from that. So I want to ask you a question because, listen, you're a multiple time entrepreneur. You coach entrepreneurs. You're raising a generation of entrepreneurs. And you've seen, kind of trends and things come and go and generations pass through the workforce. And, with each generation comes different attitudes, comes different challenges, et cetera. With the folks that you're working with today, are there any common challenges that you're seeing entrepreneurs facing now, that are just kind of more prevalent?
Yeah, I would say a couple. One is the one that we all face, which is AI. How do I get ahead of it? How do I use it? How do I keep it from steamrolling me? I've got competitors, always have competitors that are more advanced in it and others that are laggards. So this is really a wild card now, and it's affecting everybody. And if they don't know it's affecting them, they're really in trouble because it is. So that's a common trend is how do I leverage this and not let it consume me or get past me? And on a related note, most of the founders I'm encountering are very techno savvy. So they're not, fumbling and bumbling with what to do and how to do it. I think another factor that they're facing is options that are available to their target audience. With social media being what it is, all you need to do is think. You don't even need to say it. You think about something you want or need or like, and all of a sudden you're inundated with a half a dozen ways of getting it, or at least allegedly getting it, right? So the time between first indication of potential interest and purchase or commitment or maybe being consumed by all the options is very short now. And so that sense of urgency is, fueling faster decisions and more decisions than ever before. And it's kind of slowing down the client or the customer's decision because they have other options they want to weigh. And they've got AI, they've got ChatGPT reviewing the memos and the emails and helping them ponder and come up with more questions. So that the decision process is faster but more complex. And that's a tough combination. There's more considerations and less time to get through them. I think those are a couple of trends that I'm seeing.
I can definitely resonate with that. I was thinking about from a sales perspective, I think about this, like how much harder it is to get a cold customer's attention. I think the stats, like, for example, 70% of jobs that were posted on LinkedIn last year were filled by somebody that knew somebody at the company, wasn't a cold candidate. And how when AI came out, when Gen AI came out, ChatGPT became a thing, I know that I and every other salesperson in the world thought, this is going to write my emails for me. The emails that I would slave away at, and I would do a ton of research to craft these messages, I'm going to do that. And now what a carefully curated email how that would separate you at one point, it doesn't anymore because everybody's got the carefully curated email with all the research. And the market adjusts to that. And, it used to, man, I remember not long ago, you could send out 500 emails with just, hey, your name. And that was enough to essentially fool someone at the other end that you might have really written it and book some meetings. And now that won't work. You have to curate it. And I think as these things have gotten better and better, buyers or people on the other end have just, it's like when you get, what is it, a telemarketer call back in the day and your phone rang at dinner time and you're like, I'm not answering this. I already know what this is. And I feel like people have started to just kind of block out much more. It's just all becomes static and really rely heavily on their network and the people they know to make any sort of a decision.
Very true. I think this sort of faked familiarity that I get in a lot of LinkedIn outreach, they've taken a snippet from my bio page in sort of an ill-fitting way, tried to say something nice about it and use it as a hook or a jumping off point to what they want to sell or talk about. And it's almost humor. First of all, it was humorous because they were non sequiturs, and now it's kind of annoying. And the next step is I'm not even going to look at it because, again, that fake familiarity is almost worse than no familiarity because I know it's they're throwing out a massive net and hoping some fish come back in it. So I agree with you. I think, a trusted individual, there's no replacement for that. And that's why building a network, cultivating, giving value to those in your network is so important because then they'll be there for you when you need something. That's what I found to be true.
Absolutely. I love that term, fake familiarity. It's exactly what it is. Like similarly, you get a LinkedIn message and it's like, hey, Max, I saw what you're doing at Commission and it's amazing. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You don't know, it's amazing. Wow. And I read something, it was like, if your message is either like too complimentary of me or you, I already know that this is BS. Once in a while I can play that line and I'll read it through, but then when I see it, if it's not what I'm looking for, I'm out with it. And I agree. It's so interesting. I feel like the network effect, there used to be cold. It's just so much harder to crack into. And I'm even thinking in my world, we recently brought on another coach to my company, another sales coach, and I want to fill up his calendar. And my wife, who's a brilliant salesperson and she's in recruiting, she says, why don't you hit the phone and cold call? Now, I'm a big proponent of cold calling. I think that's a great way to make a difference, but I'm much better served going into my network and shaking the trees that I have for some sort of an introduction.
Absolutely. There's even fake networking now, which is another recent message I've started getting is my colleague, Fred, came across your bio and suggested I contact you. I don't know Fred. But they think having a third party in there adds some gravitas that otherwise, isn't there.
I love this. It's fake because I've done this 1,000 times where there was one time where I would send an email. I would have a business dev rep send an email to the person and CC me. And then I'd say, hey, Jim, yeah, great to get to know you. And because then they feel like they're in a conversation, but you're faking it. You're trying to trick them. Now, when it comes to being an entrepreneur, I have to imagine, I mean, listen, as the world goes on, things get more competitive. That's a constant. But this also then makes it much harder if you have a new, good or service that you're trying to offer to crack this into new crowds. This is a whole new level of complexity that, like, your cold outreach used to be a really big part of your strategy. And I'm sure for many it still is, but I just feel like it doesn't quite exist in the same way anymore.
Well, two things that I think relate to that. One is I found really good value in assessment-based selling, offering something of value, information that at no cost that would be beneficial to that person, feedback of some kind. Again, it's overdone and overused, but I think if there's any tactic that I think kind of warms up a cold call, it might be that. The second one is it's a little more methodical, but getting those first couple of clients by giving it away and then getting testimonials and introductions and endorsements. That goes a long way as well. The more wonderful things you say about yourself without any third party and confirmation of that, it's no thanks. I'm not your candidate. But I think those two things, assessment-based selling and earning those first testimonials, is a way to push back a little bit on the cold call glacier that keeps us from moving forward.
And that makes sense. And that's kind of similar to the fake familiarity is like a cheaper version of that. Hey, I saw your website in blank. Like you might not have even, but if I really am demonstrating, I really did some digging here and I really know what I'm talking, I'm not here to waste my time, you'll get me to take a look.
Also, pointing out something that a competitor of theirs is doing well tends to resonate, maybe even more than something that they are doing well or not so well. It shows the space.
You're demonstrating that you have some sort of value, you have some sort of insight.
That's right, some grounding.
That's interesting. There's a guy who I was talking to, and he was saying how, like, going after these cold contacts, essentially, he's like, I think of those like strawberries, where if you hit them, you have to hit them at the right time. They have a very brief shelf life. If they're looking for what you need, what you do at that time, they might be open. But if you catch them a week or two late, it doesn't matter. Whereas the network folks are like preservatives. They sit on the shelf. They're always there. And, eventually they all kind of come down, at some point. I've been agreeing with that more, but it's a longer strategy. So it can be, I don't know, there's a lot of pressure when you're starting a business to grow it and grow it fast, but you also want to grow it the right way. And I feel like that's constantly a balance.
Well, I mean, a couple related points would be the value of affinities. Sometimes we overlook those. It could be the school you went to, the city you live in, the sport that you played. Those things are another way to warm up a cold call. And LinkedIn is a great, pool for finding those things. It won't turn a, 1 out of 100 batting average into 50 out of 100, but it could get you 5 out of 100 in terms of responses. So I think searching for affinities and also searching for pain points, selling to pain is, to me, the magic. Promising perfection it's never credible. But if you can empathize with pain that individual's feeling, is likely to be feeling, and talk about ways you have interpreted it and addressed it and treated it, maybe even cured it, but at least treated it, I think that can resonate as well. So, empathy is the magic word to me. If you can put yourself in the shoes of that prospect credibly and consistently and authentically, you're going to get enough of them to hear you that you get your shot.
I'm very in agreement. Something you learn, I think, in sales, that people buy out of fear of pain, much more than out of the prospect of gain. And I always think about, if you've got a home and you have $40,000, just in a bank account, you want to redo your kitchen, but now there's a huge leak in the roof. Which one's getting the money? It's the one that stinks. And when I can communicate that pain, I can put myself in your shoes. You're going to trust me more. Not only that, I think a lot of founders, there's a bit of they get excited about what they're doing. And this is amazing and this is great. And I think a lot of the time when it comes to selling something, they're not buying it because they want it. They buy it because they have to, because they don't have a choice, because there's really a problem. No one's taking your call because your product is exciting. They're taking your call because there's something that's driving them nuts, and they're hoping that, I'll take the time to see if this can fix it. Like, no one goes to the doctor because it's fun. You go to the doctor because you're in pain.
Well, you got to ask enough questions to eliminate, the noise and that questioning, I think early on, as early as possible, if you can get enough time with a prospect to talk with you and answer meaningful questions, that maybe they're learning something by the answer that they hear themselves give you. That's a dialogue, and you can glom onto that and develop it and use it. If you're coming out there with your features and benefits before you even know, you've lost them. And it's beyond selling. It's earning trust and relevance.
Totally. I tell salespeople, like, first off, I think that sales pitches have gotten, at least in the SaaS space, have gotten horribly boring. I think that everybody sounds the same. It sounds like everybody went through Medic or Challenger sale, and they all, hey, I'd like to ask you these questions, and then here's my presentation, and now I'm going to close, but I don't really know you well enough to close, so I'll ask some questions bravely, and you know exactly what I'm doing. And I'm a big believer in selling starts when you stop selling and you start helping. And when you get on the phone with a potential client, 9 times out of 10, they have their guard up. They don't want to talk to you. They know that you're going for something. But at the same time, if I don't know what you want, I can't help you. If I don't know what's going on, how can I possibly make a recommendation to do this or not? And if I'm just feature throwing at you and hoping you're buying, I'm kind of being a jerk because you might not actually want this. I have no ground to stand on. But if I can say, hey, like, we're not going anywhere. We got to have like a quick, uncomfortable conversation. Why are we talking today? Like, my job is to figure out if you need this or if you don't need this. Like, there's no point in me telling you all this crap what we do. If you don't need this to begin with, then why would I put you through this? And it's really important to get them to open up, because then you can be a decent person. And you know what? If it'll help them, it's your job to get them to do this. Even if they don't want, it's in your heart of hearts, it'll help them. It's like a big brother helping a little brother. Like, I know you don't want to do this, but you have to. And if they won't, it's your job to kick them off, to get them out and maybe give them some advice somewhere else. And I think that when you have that mentality, A, you're getting them to open up. B, closing becomes not being pushy. It becomes logical of, why wouldn't you do this? You need this. You just mentioned that you're losing money by not doing X, Y, Z. I can solve that tonight. So I think that a lot boils into it. And I think, I don't know if this is kind of online what we were talking about, but I guess so. Like, I think that at the end of the day, like, authenticity and being human and learning to be yourself and not relying on this choreography, to pitch, I think it's what separates. And this is both going back to what we were saying in outreach, in an actual sales conversation, even working your network. If you're being genuine of, hey, listen, we're starting up and we have kinks we want to work out, I'll work with you for free. You're going to be more appealing. You have nothing to hide, as opposed to fake familiarity, fake, whatever it may be.
Very true. And I think there's a bias on the other end too, to not share your pain or your bad news or your fears or your doubts, especially with a stranger. It's always, you got your game face on. We're a great business. We're the prospect, right? No problems. Everything's great. Boy, you've got to earn your way past that border guard to get the real story. And that's not easy, and not everybody can do that.
Totally. It's vulnerability, and that's not a natural thing, especially for, as you said, for meeting a stranger. Now, I actually want to kind of even pivot that over, because listen, I'm starting my company and there's so much up and down and learning and, world pressure for me to succeed, and self-fabricated pressure for me to succeed. How do you see entrepreneurs helping themselves, taking care of themselves and making sure that they don't get caught up in the nonsense? I don't even know what to call it, quite honestly.
Well, most start out as a solopreneur, and that's an extremely lonely existence. And even when you've made a few hires, they're generally more tactical hires rather than a thought partner and so on. So what I found was true for myself, and it's still true, is by networking with other entrepreneurs, you get a chance to let your hair down and talk about the sleepless nights and the, stresses and the unfairness and the competitor that really makes your life hell. And you realize this is common. This is what I'm going to experience. And you can laugh about it and you can share war stories. And I find that to be a great outlet. I belong to, and I've launched quite a few entrepreneurs forums for that purpose. And the people in those forums cannot wait for the next meeting, because they've all got issues and problems. They've got good things to share in their updates, but there's always an issue or a problem that is really eating away at them. And only in the company of non-competing fellow entrepreneurs do they have this outlet to relieve some of that pressure and get some advice and guidance, or at least some, commiseration on the situation. So I think that's really key, is connect, engage, and be open with non-competing entrepreneurs. It's fantastic.
Sounds like group therapy.
In many ways it is, but I find it most successful when there's no facilitator, there's no objective, know-it-all at the head of the table. An entrepreneur should be able to be open and candid and clear in communicating the good, the bad, and the ugly. And when that happens, that's where you build the trust. So it is group therapy in a way, but it's even more actionable than therapy. I mean, there might be a solution there, or an introduction to a resource or a supplier or a vendor that just flips the switch. And all of a sudden, what was driving you crazy and churning in your stomach now is like a big win that's just about to happen. And it happens more often than not, I found.
That sounds fantastic, honestly.
And if you're not in a group like that, start one. It's not that hard.
Can I tell you, that's a brilliant idea. I'd never even thought about something like that.
I've done it a half a dozen times with affinity groups of one kind or another, and they always take off. They might have a shorter life, maybe a year or two. The one I've been in for 15 years with most of the same members. And we've all gone through the entire entrepreneurial journey together, from startup to bootstrapping, to getting partners or losing partners, to selling, exiting, and then starting something else. And it's been great.
Wow. Can I tell you, like, it's something that I hadn't considered, because as you're saying this, I'm thinking that sounds amazing. Like, even just as you said, somewhere to let your hair down. It's so exhausting, putting up the we're doing great, because there are days you're doing great and there are days where you're not feeling great and it's not fun and you don't want to share that. You don't want to, it's a very hard thing. And I'm thinking that in itself, to just like let the pin out, alleviate some of that pressure, sounds delightful. But also tactically, if I can get introduced to somebody that might help me as I'm letting down my hair, wait a minute, this is really unbelievable.
It goes back to that affinity point that I mentioned before. All you need to do is reach out to a directory of your college alums, fraternity, sorority, religious place of worship, and put the call out there. Entrepreneurs Forum is what I call it. We're going to meet. We can do it by Zoom. We do it in person. We go out and have dinner afterwards or lunch afterwards. And it's something, but about every 6 weeks, it's a blast. It has helped me tremendously, personally and professionally.
That is so cool. I imagine, so first off, the idea of like sitting, meeting, and then afterwards we go get dinner, like that feels so good. And it brings you closer and with these folks. It probably helps to be in some sort of a metro area.
It does, but you can do it remotely if it's not.
You can do it remotely.
Not a problem. And we rotate the chair, so that, every meeting someone else is organizing and facilitating. We go around the table, 5-minute updates, personal, professional. Then who has an issue that they either want suggested solutions or at least war stories that I've been through that like you have.
Holy crap. This is brilliant.
Yeah. 2 hours and you've conquered the world, or at least for a month.
I think I'm going to be launching into this. Like, I want to start something like this. I'm already paying like who to message, because who wouldn't benefit from that?
Exactly. It's free and it's fun.
Yeah. I mean, again, not just venting and feeling better, but actually, like we're talking about, having that mentors that you can really trust and rely on. This is another source of that.
That's right. And helping somebody else with an issue that's eating them up really kind of levels the playing field. And you feel like, okay, whatever's bothering me, I'm going to help.
This is a crazy thing. I was going through a very difficult time in my life, and I ran into Tracy Morgan in the supermarket. Like, I'm not kidding. I was going through a divorce when I was younger, and my world is falling apart. Oh my God, what is happening? And I run into Tracy Morgan in the supermarket, and I went up to him, like really on the low, feeling the lowest of lows. And I said, by the way, like, I'm a huge fan of 30 Rock, and I've seen a lot of your stand-up specials, and it's been really helpful for me going through this trying time. And I'll never forget, because I'm expecting some like goofy Tracy Morgan response. And he said, you know how you help yourself? Help somebody else. He said, go to the Ronald McDonald House. There are kids with cancer who are dying, and You think your problems are, he didn't even know what I was going through, but he goes, you think your problems are bad? Like, it'll put it into perspective. And there is something to that, even like sometimes like in a relationship, one person gets hot and freaks out, and for whatever reason, the other person makes them cooler and more calm and collect. So when you're going to something like this, you may be down on yourself, down on your luck. But if someone has a problem that you can help out with, you're going to feel more empowered. You're going to feel like you contributed something.
Here's the positive side of that whole equation too, which is when those across the table have a big win or a success, and it was something you suggested or contributed to, you get the same euphoric response as if you did it. And we all need that dopamine hit as an entrepreneur. Is it dopamine? Whatever the good chemical is, the joy and the euphoria of a big win, that now that person is thanking everyone else around the table for contributing to it. And you leave with a big smile on your face, and it's really a kick. So it works both ways.
I totally, and you know what, like I'll never forget, I was in sales and it feels good to close the deal. And then when I started leading salespeople, when they closed the deal, it was, oh my God, I felt so much pressure for them to hit their goal. And then when they did, it's literally why I started a sales coaching company, because I love that. I get such a kick out of that. And this is morbid, what I'm about to say, but they were looking at like the suicide rates of males today are staggering. They're through the roof, compared to females. And when they analyzed letters, goodbye letters that people wrote as they took their lives, the number one word that came up was worthless. They felt worthless. And I feel like as an entrepreneur, and again, I know what I'm saying here is dark, but you're putting something into the world and hoping that it takes, hoping that the world sees value in it. And if you put something out and it doesn't take, you feel your company has no worth. This effort that you've been putting forth, your best self it's a brutal feeling. So exactly here is you're going and meeting with other entrepreneurs. If you can give a piece of advice that they like and they appreciate, you immediately feel a sense of worth, in whatever capacity. You feel better about yourself. You're sitting amongst people that you respect, that you look up to, that you fight, like we're all in this. And wow, that person in the room who I think is really bright, they liked my idea. You feel really, really good about yourself. And, a lot of like I always say, like if you get caught up in the motion of the ocean, you're going to get seasick. So if I can do something to keep that grounded, there are going to be ups and downs, but it's the trend that we look at. It's how did it perform over the year, 2 years, 5 years, not how did it perform on the day? It's an amazing solution.
Yep, I agree.
Stuff out there.
It's a jungle.
It's a jungle. Oh, man. All right. So, Dan, believe it or not, we're actually like approaching time here. Any last thoughts? Anything you want to say to the audience? Anything else you want to share?
Boy, I've really kind of opened up here. I would say maybe one thing, which is at this stage of my career, a lot of my friends are retiring or stopping doing things. And I see that. And unless it's a health issue, I'm kind of puzzled by it. Because what that means really is they haven't come up with that next idea or that next opportunity. They've stopped being an observer and an interpreter and a, recorder of the world around them. Because I think there's always something emerging, some need, some opportunity that if you're truly an entrepreneur, you cannot say no to. You've got to explore it, consider it. You might just do it as a consultant to others that are in that space or starting a business yourself. But I think that our word, retirement, is ridiculous and a self-imposed retreat. And as long as one's healthy, and I am, and I'm happy about that, I'm always going to have that next idea and I'm going to explore it. The money will follow. And if it's a real need that you're addressing and you do it, enthusiastically and authentically, as you said before, it's going to give you satisfaction later in life that your peers who retired last week or 5 years ago, they don't have that. Where do they find that? I mean, they're either chasing their family around who has their own priorities, or they're, bemoaning the fact that they didn't make enough money to be able to keep themselves amused, whatever. But the alternatives, I think, are energy sapping and not very gratifying. So I would just say, anybody that's got some gray hair that is thinking that journey is slowing down or coming to a close, don't let it. You can push back on that. And that's a badge of honor, in my opinion, to have multiple hats on the rack behind you that you've done it and learned from and enjoy. And so that's my mantra for myself, is not done yet. There's always one more, and it's a blast.
Wow. Well, ladies and gentlemen, here's the gold standard of that exactly.
Well, thank you.
All right, Dan, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to have you back.
Thank you, Max. Appreciate it. I enjoyed it as well.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Closing Conversations. Huge thanks to Dan Bauer for joining me. Dan's got the kind of perspective that only comes from building, leading, exiting, mentoring, and then choosing to keep going anyway. If you liked this episode, subscribe, leave a review, or share it with somebody building something of their own. And if you're working on building a sales team that actually knows how to connect, sell, and grow the right way, head over to www.commissionsales.com. We'll see you next time. And until then, let's get closing. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget, you can always catch us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts for more episodes of Closing Conversations.